Okay, so, when we think about, like, wealthy people in America,
Yeah.
we picture, like, big houses, fancy cars, all that stuff.
Yeah, right.
But what if that's, like, totally wrong?
That's a great question. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating, how so many Americans are actually building wealth. It's like under the radar.
Right, it's not what we see on TV or in the movies.
Exactly. And that is what we are going to explore today.
Yes, so we are going to dive deep into the real deal about America's wealthiest people.
Awesome.
And we're going to be using this super interesting book called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko.
Great book.
And the goal here is to figure out the most important things this book teaches us about how regular people become really wealthy.
Love it.
And, maybe what we learned today will change how you think about all this stuff about wealth.
Yeah, for sure.
So no matter what you're doing right now, like if you're thinking about your next job or just trying to understand how money works, or even if you're just curious, this is going to be really useful for you.
Absolutely.
All right, so this book, The Millionaire Next Door, it talks about these people who are millionaires.
Right.
But they don't live like how you'd think a millionaire would live.
Right. They live in normal houses, drive normal cars, and they just blend in.
Totally. And it's so different from what we usually think of when we hear the word millionaire.
Yeah, for sure.
So the authors, they have this great phrase to describe this. It's big hat, no cattle.
I love that one.
Yeah. So they interviewed this businessman from Texas, and he had a really successful business rebuilding diesel engines.
Wow.
But he drove this old pickup truck and dressed casually, lived in a normal neighborhood with postal workers and mechanics.
So he had the cattle, meaning the wealth, but not the big hat, the flashy stuff.
Exactly. And that idea is really what this whole book is about.
It makes you think about what it really means to be wealthy in America.
Okay, so let's jump into it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things the book talks about is the difference between wealth and income.
Right. It's not just about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep.
Yeah, the authors say, and I love this quote, if you make a good income each year and spend it all, you are not getting wealthier. You are just living high.
It's about building assets and financial security, not just having money pass through your hands.
Exactly. And another important point is that most people who become millionaires, they don't do it by winning the lottery or inheriting money.
Right.
And it's not always about having a fancy degree or being super smart.
Yeah, the book found that something like 80 to 85% of millionaires, they earned their wealth themselves.
Wow, that's huge.
It's all about hard work, saving, planning, and being disciplined.
So it's a journey. And it sounds like for many of these people, the journey is more satisfying than actually being a millionaire.
Yeah, they feel proud of what they've accomplished.
Okay, so we've talked about the difference between wealth and income.
Yeah.
What else do these millionaires have in common?
Well, one of the biggest things is that they are frugal.
Frugality. No, wait a minute. Before everyone starts thinking, we're saying you have to be like a total penny pincher.
Right.
It's not about being cheap. It's about making smart choices about your money.
Exactly.
So the book talks about these two types of people, PAWs and UAWs.
Those are great terms. What do they stand for again?
PAW stands for Prodigious Accumulator of Wealth, and UAW is Under Accumulator of Wealth.
Right, so PAWs are the folks who have way more wealth than you'd expect based on their age and income.
And UAWs are the opposite.
Yeah, and one of the main differences between them is how they spend their money.
Okay, so millionaires are usually PAWs, and they are often pretty careful about how much they spend on things that other people might think are important, like clothes.
Right, they don't feel the need to buy expensive brands or follow the latest trends.
The book has this example of a couple, both engineers, making good money, and they decided to live off of just one person's salary and save the other one.
Wow, talk about disciplined.
Yeah, and when they took their kids out to eat, they had them order from the value menu.
That's commitment.
Right, and it's not just stories. The book has data, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like it says that almost 90% of millionaires spent less than $3,800 on a suit.
I would have guessed way more than that.
Would too. And get this, the median price a self-made millionaire paid for a suit was only $360.
Wow.
But for someone who inherited their wealth, it was over $600.
That's really interesting.
It shows how people who had to work for their money think about spending differently.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, and this one blew my mind. The book says that a good chunk of millionaires, something like 30%, have JCPenney credit cards.
Seriously.
Yeah, so much for the stereotype of millionaires only shopping at fancy stores.
Totally breaks the mold.
And the book says that if you want to build wealth, it really helps to have a partner who's also frugal.
Yeah, it's tough to save money if one person is spending it as fast as it comes in.
Like a basic math problem.
Exactly.
They have this great example in the book, Mrs. Jane Rule. She's a millionaire auctioneer.
Cool.
Yeah, and her average income over 5 years was like $90,000 a year.
Okay.
Not bad, but not like crazy high. But guess what? She had over $2 million in net worth.
Wow, how'd she do that?
She was super disciplined about her money. She budgeted and planned everything.
So even with a regular income, she was able to become a millionaire.
Yeah, and the book says that more millionaires actually use a budget than don't.
Really?
Yeah, about 120 who do for every 100 who don't.
Huh. I would have thought more people would just kind of wing it.
Me too. But it makes sense. If you're trying to build wealth, you got to know where your money is going.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we've talked about how millionaires are usually frugal and they plan their spending. Now let's talk about how they use their time, energy, and money.
This is where we see even more differences between those PAWs and UAWs.
Yeah, so the book talks about these two doctors, Dr. North and Dr. South.
Okay,
They both make about the same amount of money.
got it.
But Dr. North, he's a PAW, and he's always planning his finances, and he's careful about how much he
So
spends.
smart.
Dr. South, though, he's a UAW, and he doesn't really have a budget or anything.
So he's more of a free spender.
Yeah, and the book talks about this strategy for building wealth called the 15% method.
What's that?
Basically, you invest at least 15% of your income before taxes every year.
Seems simple enough.
Yeah, but it takes discipline and planning.
True.
And then when we look at big purchases like cars, we see more differences.
Oh.
So remember that big hat, no cattle idea?
Yeah.
Well, most millionaires never spend a ton of money on a car.
How much are we talking?
Like most of them never spend close to $65,000.
Huh.
And over half of them have never paid more than $30,000 for a car.
That's surprising.
Yeah, but then we have Dr. South again. He spent over $70,000 on his car.
Yikes.
And he was only saving a tiny bit for retirement, like $1 for every $125 he made.
That's not a good ratio.
Not at all. So it really makes you think about what's more important to you right now versus later.
For sure. Are you focused on enjoying things today or building security for the future?
And it's interesting because the book says that PAWs, because they have their finances figured out, they tend to worry less about money.
That makes sense. Less stress.
Yeah, and that frees up their energy to focus on other things, like, making more money.
Interesting.
And speaking of making money, PAWs are more likely to be self-employed.
Really?
Yeah, they like having control over their own economic future.
That makes sense.
And the book shows how PAWs are way less worried about losing their jobs than UAWs are.
I guess when you work for yourself, you don't have to worry about getting laid off.
Exactly. And when it comes to investing, PAWs are really proactive.
Okay.
They spend a lot of time planning their investments, and they start doing it earlier in life.
So it's all about the long game.
Exactly. It's
Ah.
not about getting rich quick. It's about making smart decisions over time.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we've talked about how millionaires tend to be frugal, they plan their spending, and they're often self-employed. Now let's get into something specific. What kind of cars do they actually drive?
Yeah, the book has this chapter called You Aren't What You Drive.
I love that title.
It's really interesting because it goes against the idea that rich people all drive fancy cars.
Yeah, it turns out most millionaires drive American cars.
Really?
Yeah, brands like Ford Cadillac and Lincoln.
Okay.
And the models they drive are pretty practical, like Ford F-150s and Explorers.
Those are good trucks and SUVs.
And get this, the most popular model among millionaires is the Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Huh. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Me neither. And for Cadillac, it's often the DeVille or Fleetwood Brougham, and for Lincoln, the Town Car.
Interesting. So not like sports cars or super luxurious stuff?
Not really.
So they're not trying to impress anyone with their car?
Nope. It's all about function and value.
I like that.
The book breaks down millionaire car buyers into 3 groups.
Okay, listening.
First, you've got the new vehicle-prone dealer loyalists. They like buying new cars and sticking with the same dealer.
Okay, makes sense.
Then there's the used vehicle-prone dealer loyalists. They prefer buying used and often go back to the same dealer.
So they value trust and familiarity.
Yeah, and then the biggest group is the dealer shoppers.
What do they do?
They're all about getting the best price, whether the car is new or used or from a specific dealer.
So they're savvy shoppers.
Totally, and most millionaires are dealer shoppers.
Makes sense. They're not swayed by brand names. They want the best deal.
Exactly. And it's cool because the book shows that people who buy used cars are also more likely to have had frugal parents, shop at discount stores, and spend less on things like watches, suits, and shoes.
So it's all part of the same mindset.
Yeah, it's about being smart with your money no matter what you're buying.
I love it. The book also brings back that big hat, no cattle idea with the story about a dad explaining to his son that they could either get a pool or send him to Cornell.
Wow, tough choice.
Right. It really shows their values education over luxury.
Exactly. It's about investing in what matters most.
All right, so we've talked about how millionaires are frugal, they plan their spending, they're often self-employed, and they don't blow money on flashy cars.
Right.
Now let's talk about this concept the book calls economic outpatient pair, or EOC.
EO.
This is a really important part of understanding why some people build wealth and others don't.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
So EOC is basically when wealthy parents give a lot of financial help to their adult kids and grandkids.
Like giving them money, down payments on houses, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And while it might seem nice, the book says that it can actually make it harder for those kids to build their own wealth.
Huh. Why is that?
It can create a sense of dependence.
They don't learn how to manage money on their own?
Right, and the book has some interesting statistics on this. They looked at 10 different job categories.
Okay.
And in 8 of those categories, the people who got big financial gifts from their parents actually had less net worth than those who didn't.
That's so counterintuitive. You'd think getting a bunch of money would help.
Right, but the book suggests that it can actually hurt people's long-term financial success.
They become reliant on those handouts.
Exactly.
But there are some exceptions though, right?
Yeah, the book mentions teachers and professionals who got financial gifts actually had more net worth than those who didn't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems like they might be using the money differently. Maybe investing it instead of just spending it.
Maybe they're more used to thinking long term.
Could be. And the book also talks about how EOC can lead to what they call a treadmill of consumption.
Okay, what's that?
So when you're getting regular financial help, it's easy to start spending more and more because you know there's always a safety net.
It's like you never learn to live within your means.
Exactly, and that makes it really hard to become financially independent.
So you can have a high income but still struggle financially.
That's right. The book has this example of 2 guys, Henry and Josh.
Okay.
Henry didn't make a lot of money, but he never got any EOC, and he ended up being really good with money.
What about Josh?
Josh made way more money than Henry, but he got a lot of EOC, and he didn't do as well financially.
So it's not just about how much you earn, it's about how you manage it.
Exactly. And this brings up a really important question. What are the best things parents can give their kids to help them be successful financially?
That's a good question.
Well, the book says the most important things are education and an environment that encourages independence, achievement, and responsibility.
So basically teaching them good values and how to stand on their own 2 feet.
Exactly. And it's interesting because when the authors asked millionaires what gifts they got from their parents, the most common answer was tuition.
So their parents invested in their education.
Yeah, and the book also found that the kids who were the most successful financially often got less EOC and inheritance.
So they had to figure things out for themselves.
It's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
I like that. And they talk about these 2 types of daughters of wealthy families, type A and type B.
Right, type A daughters are more independent and they often take care of others.
And type B daughters are more dependent and they get more financial help.
And often that pattern continues into adulthood.
Yeah. The type B daughters and their families might end up relying on their parents financially even when they're middle-aged.
It shows how those early experiences can have long-lasting effects.
Okay, so we've learned a lot about the habits and mindsets of wealthy people. Now let's talk about how these trends are creating new opportunities.
Yeah, the book has a chapter called Find Your Niche.
It sounds promising.
It is. It talks about how wealth is becoming more concentrated in the hands of millionaire households.
Right.
And as that happens, there's a growing need for certain services that cater to these wealthy families.
Like what?
Well, think about it. As people get richer, they need more help with things like taxes and estate planning.
So there's a big need for accountants who specialize in that stuff.
Exactly. And not just accountants. There's also a need for financial advisors who can help people manage their investments and protect their assets.
It's like a whole ecosystem is growing around these millionaire families.
And it's not just financial services either.
What else?
Well, wealthy people also need specialized medical and dental care.
So doctors and dentists who are experts in their fields are in high demand.
Right. And there's also a growing need for housing specialists who understand the luxury real estate market.
And what about things like philanthropy and travel?
Yeah, there's a need for fundraising consultants to help wealthy people donate their money effectively.
And travel agents who can plan those fancy trips.
Exactly. So if you're looking for opportunities, there are plenty to be found in serving the needs of the affluent.
Makes sense. But one of the most important points in this chapter is that most wealthy people in America are business owners and self-employed professionals.
Yeah, the book says they're 4 times more likely to be millionaires than people who work for someone else.
So if you want to be wealthy, starting your own business might be the way to go.
It's not for everyone, but it definitely increases your chances.
And the book even talks about how some sole proprietorships can be really profitable.
It's all about finding the right niche and being good at what you do.
Right. And it takes courage to start your own business.
Yeah, you have to be willing to take risks and overcome your fears.
The book gives examples like Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's, and Lee Iacocca, who saved Chrysler.
They both faced challenges, but they persevered and achieved amazing things.
Inspiring stories, for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different aspects of wealth.
Yeah, from frugality to investing to finding your niche.
Now let's look at the difference between people who made their own wealth and those who inherited it.
Sounds good. The book has this chapter called Jobs, Millionaires versus Heirs.
And they tell this fascinating story about a guy named Mr. W.
Okay, what's his story?
So he's a self-made millionaire worth over $30 million.
Wow.
But he lives a pretty simple life. He has a house in a middle-class neighborhood, drives regular cars, and keeps a low profile.
He's like the ultimate millionaire next door.
Exactly, and he's really smart about real estate.
How so?
He buys properties when the price is right, often from people who are in financial trouble.
So he's patient and waits for the right opportunity.
Yeah, he's not afraid to negotiate, and he knows how to spot a good deal.
Smart. But the book also tells this story about how he fought to keep his dog in his condo building.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
He actually won the legal battle, but in the end, he and his wife decided to sell their condo anyway. They didn't want to live in a place where their dog wasn't welcome.
Wow, so they valued their dog's happiness over making more money.
Exactly. It shows how they prioritize their values and quality of life over just maximizing their profits.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. It shows that true wealth isn't just about money. It's about having the freedom to make choices that align with your values.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
Wait.
If you're listening, what are the key takeaways you should remember?
Well, the main point is that wealth is usually built through hard work, frugality planning, and disciplined spending.
It's not about hitting the jackpot or getting a huge inheritance.
Right, and that idea of the flashy millionaire, it's often wrong.
Most millionaires are actually pretty low-key.
Yeah, they blend in and they focus on building their wealth over the long term.
And we learned that giving your kids a ton of money might actually hurt them financially.
It can make them dependent and prevent them from developing the skills they need to be successful.
So what's the best thing parents can do?
Give their kids a good education, teach them good values, and encourage them to be independent.
Makes sense.
So, as we wrap up here, I want to leave you with a question.
Okay, go for it.
Think about your own relationship with money. Are you spending more than you save? Are you planning for the future or just living in the moment?
Are you on the path to building real wealth?
What small changes can you make today to become the millionaire next door?
Great questions to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Millionaire Next Door.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the millionaire next door.
I hope so.
Until next time, keep learning and keep growing your wealth.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening.